Dispatch is an extremely exciting game. It's a Telltale style game made of former Telltale devs, voiced by some of the most high profile names out there, and beautifully animated in a way which we haven't really seen a game be animated before. What's not to love? Well, the truth is not much. From just the first 2 episodes, Dispatch sets itself up to be an instant classic, with witty writing, compelling characters, and really quite interesting pockets of emergency simulation in between. If you've ever played a Telltale game, you know what you're getting yourself into here. This game is very narrative focused, but perhaps less so than other games like it because of the lengthy gameplay sections in between the classic watch the story and choose your dialogue options stuff. That's not to say that you don't get enough story, because you do, but rather this emergency response simulator side of the game elevates the experience to be unique and special. Although even without that side of the game, I'd say this game would be pretty unique and special anyway. Right, let's start broadly and talk about how this game looks, and I mean the visual style here is an absolute feast. I need to mention that if you're seeing any choppy footage at all, that's not any fault of the game, it's happening because my machine's pretty old, and so in some of the action scenes there's a decent bit of screen tearing. I really do apologise, but most of the game ran fine, and my specs did not stop the game from looking beautiful. The best comparison I have for watching this game is that it looks like a blend of Iron Man Armored Adventures, if anyone's seen that. It's got that simple 3D cell shading look, along with the refinement and character expression of a show like Arcane. There's barely any awkward or stiff animation aside from a little at the start of the game, but after that every character and their faces, their body movements all have so much life abundant in them. The quality is very much at the right level. It looks so good that by the end of my time with it, I had to remind myself that I wasn't watching a show. It looks incredibly vivid and fluid and has some genuinely great shots. My favourite one so far is this one outside the dispatch centre. I think it's framed quite nicely, and the orange coming in from the sunset really catches the eye. All the artwork feels that extra bit fresh because we've never seen a Telltale style game look like this. And you know, the artwork is probably one of the reasons this game might interest you. I know it caught my eye when the game was revealed, and I can tell you that it's just as good as you think it is. Now you combine that impressive animation and visual style with a superhero universe and the interesting premise we have here, and we're really getting onto a winner. I'm going to try and keep the overview of the story and characters loose here because it feels great to experience the character work firsthand, and I assume this will carry forward, so watch out for any sort of spoilers before you play. You play as a superhero named Mecha Man. He's recently had to retire from saving the city and takes up an offer to work at a superhero emergency response center, where he handles cases and sends his assigned group of heroes out to address different troubles in the city. A lot has gone wrong in his life, and he often feels like a grumpy, lonesome character without ever actually being one. Mecha Man feels gripping because he has depth of emotion despite not much of the story being out. He's extremely dedicated to helping people and has a temper when things don't go to plan and someone gets hurt, but also never really broods despite his tragic story. His grump always comes off sarcastically, and it's really good sarcasm, so I ended up being quite magnetized towards his personality. He's got the right balance of a whimsical comedian and a pessimistic veteran, and interacts with the other characters in a really satisfying way. Aaron Paul, yes you heard that right, also delivers what I think is the strongest voice performance so far, with just enough gravel in his voice to perfectly match the character of Mecha Man, although there is some tight competition there. I do think there's a lot of room here for Mecha Man to become a very compelling main character. The other main character so far is Blonde Blazer, the branch leader of the dispatch center. I think there's a lot of room for her to be a gripping character, but I don't think we've seen what's going to make her special just yet. There is a flash of depth right at the end of chapter 2. I really do like the direction the story is headed there, but for most of the intro she's felt quite cliche and unremarkable. While to her credit she hasn't had any of her own story told yet, she's had this honestly quite awkward and rushed push into being the romantic figure for the main character. They share this drunk scene of connection and the romantic undertone just didn't feel quite right, and I think that must be intentional because me and a lot of the other players decided to both not kiss her there, and a majority of us decided to not ask her out later on. And with where the story leaves us until next week, I do think there's a lot of room for the romance to feel a lot more genuine. And sort of separate to that link to Mecha Man, I really quite strongly think that she's going to become a very good character of her own. But you know, maybe that's my mind racing with all the possibilities of what could happen next. Although, now that I think about it, that is a really impressive thing for this game to have done. It's set up an interesting story beat that I'm really looking forward to seeing more of, which honestly might be all you need to hear to sell you on this. The other characters are just as much of a highlight. Invisigal and Chase are 2 characters who are just as much a highlight as Mecha Man so far. There's a lot of conversation you can have about superheroes and tropes, and this game is a part of that conversation. Neither of these characters have extremely inventive personalities, but they do have vibrant ones. Invisigal being sarcastic and rebellious, and Chase being the older mentor character. And while we've seen both of these things done before, they still feel engaging, not just because the characters are written well into these roles, but also because they add extra things to riff on these classic roles. It's mentioned that Invisigal has ADHD, something which they can build on later, and she also has an asthma pump. Chase is indeed the mentor character who introduces us to everything, but he's also got the driest sense of humour I've ever seen. Seriously, this guy rolls off some incredible lines.
It's a hug, not a hand job. Lighten up.
The humour in this game is absolutely nailed. I don't normally laugh at comedy pieces. It's how I've always been. A lot of the jokes I hear in these things are either disappointing, really disappointingly obvious, or disappointingly edgy. Dispatch is full of sarcasm and dry humour as well as dirty shock value jokes. It's absolutely perfect. I laughed at my screen a fair few times, which if you're good at maths is more than 0 times, which is mostly the number of laughs any other game, show or film gets out of me. It's seriously funny and surprisingly so, since my idea of a typical office comedy is that it doesn't really hit as a comedy. Anyway, it seems to me that going forward a lot of the characters will appear to fit into a mold that has been portrayed in media several times before, but adding an extra thing to keep that mold exciting. We've seen it with these two, you see it with another character I won't name, and we'll probably see it again more. These characters feel fresh in their writing and human in their conversation. Even in the dispatching section in the second chapter, the heroes you have control of just talk to each other the whole time, like real people. Their conversations are exciting and a real nice add, and the writing was engaging outside of characters too. Like when you think this encounter with a hot-headed guy in a bar is just a one-off, only to find out the next day that you're actually his boss now. That moment made me smile, and there were many more too. In terms of gameplay, things tail off a bit, but not too much. Starting with what I didn't think was particularly impressive, the QTEs are a bit lame. There are hardly any of them, and they felt very unnecessary. My only vivid memory with them is during a fight scene at the start of the game because the sliders started after Mecha Man had already taken half the action. This felt kind of janky and you don't start the action yourself, so there's no feeling that you're controlling this character in any way. I don't even remember doing a QT in the second chapter. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things and doesn't affect your enjoyment of the game, but it definitely can feel restrictive. I bring this up because the game deviates from the classic Telltale games by not having sections where you walk around and interact with things. This is completely fine, right? I actually think it works a lot better this way. But it is interesting how they decided to axe that aspect of the game and yet still bring QTEs back for a couple times an hour. The QTEs are too sparse to be considered a gameplay element, and I'm really hoping the next few chapters zero in on this game feeling like a TV show, because it's doing a really good job of that so far. I think this game would flow much worse if there were exploratory sections, so Ad Hoc made the right decision there. The game is constant story and dialogue options, which I've found to be very enjoyable so far, and the narrative itself is looking very promising if the game carries on like this. Dispatch tries to make a new name for itself, not through innovating past gameplay systems, but through adding new ones instead. I had to clear quite a few puzzles revolving around moving a cube through a maze of sorts, where I was opening and closing paths to hit important nodes and get keys. This stuff is enjoyable enough, and you see in the trailer how crazy looking this puzzle is later on in the game, so I think they expand on these puzzles a lot as the game goes further on. The big one is the emergency response simulation. Playing as Mecha Man, you'll handle your new squad of heroes who you've been assigned. I've been calling them heroes all game, but they're actually villains who I think are trying to reform through dispatch work. Either way, incidents pop up on this map you have, and then you have to decide which hero or heroes are best at the job based on contextual clues about what the job might require from their characteristics, and also straight facts on the side telling you which of the 5 stats in that game hero would need to do this job well. You have heroes who are good at talking to people, heroes who are strong, heroes who are durable, etc. You have to pay attention to who they are outside of their stats, because I think if I sent this lug to go save a child's balloon, then they would have almost certainly cried. You then have to manage everything well because it takes time for each hero to travel to the incident, manage it, come back home, and then rest. Why you need to rest after saving a balloon, I don't know, but hey, we're just the dispatcher, can't judge. This gameplay loop is another one where I think it's going to get a lot more in depth and involved later on in the game. Already you see a huge leap from the quite basic introductory section to the first real dispatching section in the second chapter. You get your heroes and they start talking to each other with personality, and progression systems are introduced to upgrade each hero's stats, and the incidents themselves become more inventive. Like when that guy I mentioned in the bar earlier starts a fire somewhere, we have to handle that too. By the end of the opening hours of the game, I was really excited by this system and had a lot of fun with it. It's a really nice break from the story, and I can see the management of it all becoming quite addictive. There's good stuff here to match the rest. So Dispatch is looking extremely promising. Hell, I'd say the game is already worth it. If you're at all interested, I would actually encourage buying it now instead of waiting for all the chapters to release. I normally would avoid that with a TV show because, as we all know, it can take months for those once-a-week episodes to finally finish, but for Dispatch you won't really have to wait long. They're releasing 2 episodes every Wednesday for the next 3 weeks for a total of 8 chapters. I don't think this is too sparse, and if you get it now, you'll give yourself the privilege of being excited to see where the story goes, and the privilege of being involved in conversations regarding the story and what's going on. I think if you blasted through all 8 chapters, you would lose a lot of love that even now I'm building up for the game as I wait to see what happens next. It's like what I hear people say about One Piece. You could wait till it's over, but then you don't get to join in the hype and mystery of what the One Piece is. Dispatch is not as big of a commitment, and the story is obviously on the exact same level as One Piece. Wait, is that really my final message? Play Dispatch instead of watching One Piece? What? Anyway, give yourself the pleasure of letting this game simmer. It'll make that next chapter just that bit more sweet.